Welcome, one and all, to this week's episode of Hell If We Know. This is Chris giving you the intro this week without the accompaniment of a beautiful acoustic guitar that Jonathan usually provides. The reason for which being, Jonathan is out of town this weekend, and so this is an episode that we recorded maybe a month or two ago. And we are going to be talking with two guests this week who are friends of Jonathan, Emily, Mikhail, and Meredith Check. They are both young adult volunteers, just like our boy Jonathan was a couple months ago. And this episode, we're going to be examining the Hulu TV show Handmaid's Tale, which is based off of a Bible passage, and it's set in a sort of a dystopian future. Just a quick heads up, though, this episode was recorded a few months ago when we did have some technology problems, and so it's not the best audio quality. I apologize for that wholeheartedly, but we'll have you right back on track next weekend with a fantastic episode. So enjoy this week's quickie episode, and we will see you soon.
So this is Hell If We Know. It's the podcast hosted by me and Chris, and sometimes we have people. This is the first time we've had people.
People, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Meredith.
What justifies your being on this really prestigious show?
Jonathan asked, and I have strong feelings about Handmaid's Tale, so...
We're all in the same year of service program. This is the kind of stuff we talk about all the time anyways.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very frequent.
So we've got some questions set for when we have guests. Question number 1. What is your religious or spiritual background?
I identify as Christian within the Presbyterian Church, USA.
Also same, cradle Presbyterian, ordained elder, born and raised, 23 years, very involved in the Presbyterian Church.
Groovy. What is your relationship to or understanding of the Christian Bible?
There is one.
It's like the pirate code. It's more like that.
Yeah, it's the pirate code.
Yeah.
I'm not a person who has the either skill or want to be able to quote the Christian Bible, but I get the general gist.
The kind of people who, you just, name a Bible verse and they're like, oh, yeah, I know that one. It's in this chapter, this verse. I'm like, how do you know that? Have you ever read another book besides the Bible?
Like that. And I was, the Bible, superstar in Sunday school. I was the obnoxious person in class who was like, I know where that is.
Right.
But that did not survive me into adulthood.
My shining star was at one point I could name all of the books in the Old Testament.
Did you know a song for it?
No, I had a pen.
Wait, it was all just written on a pen?
Yeah, it was one of the clicky pens that you click it and then the view changes, and so it had it in order.
Oh, it had that little cutout in the pen itself, so it rotated?
And it rotated through all of the books of the Old Testament.
Well, I'm gonna guess this is early 2000s before actual technology was invented.
It was during my confirmation, so in 06?
A dark
Or
time.
07?
It was 08, 09. So
Yeah.
it would have been 06.
This was when the Motorola Razr reigned true over humanity. So
Yes. And I had the Crazer, so not quite the Razor.
The cranberry flavor.
Huh? No, it was
Yes.
this black, wannabe Razor thing, but it wasn't. But it's a lot more sturdy than the Razor.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Question number 3. What is your academic or professional background? You can answer that. That's a weird question. You can answer that.
Major in psychology, minor in sociology and urban studies from a small liberal arts school with a big liberal arts focus, and currently working in a nonprofit that works with young moms and kids. So very much on the social work, social justice, how the policy affect real people kind of a thing.
This is the future liberals want.
This is the
Yes.
liberals one.
Yes. And let's see, mine is degrees in history and international studies, and I got my minor in Russian studies from a very large public university which got shafted on a lot of liberal art research funding. And I'm currently working in a nonprofit that works to educate students about social justice issues and kind of break down stereotypes.
You said educate children? What age children?
The youth. So we work with 8th graders through college students.
Okay. Yeah, so
all
them's the
babies.
youths.
Yeah, the youths.
Yeah, Chris is teaching in Korea right now.
Oh, fun.
Where
He's familiar.
It's a city called Cheongju. If you already have forgotten it, that's okay. It's very unremarkable.
We have friends who are teaching or working in Dijon, so.
Oh, no way. Dijon is like the city right next to me.
Dude,
Yeah.
I've told you about this before.
Surprise!
Wait, have you really?
Yeah. No, because
Nuh-uh.
Daejeon is like a big, because it's also connected to Hanam, which is the Korean university
Mhm.
that like was partnered
I
with
almost
my
went
school
there.
that I went to.
Wow, okay, who knew?
Yeah.
Wow,
So-
I can literally take a bus to Daejeon in like 30 minutes.
You can go see other people in our YAV program.
Yeah.
If
That's
you are
true.
so inclined.
There's some good
Wow,
ones out
Queen.
there. I recommend it.
Yeah, they're cool people.
Yeah.
They're good
I
people.
like that group.
Cool.
Yeah.
Who knew? And wait,
Yeah.
how did you all meet each other again? You didn't go to the same college.
No.
No, so we're all in the same year-long volunteer program.
Like AmeriCorps, but not.
Yeah.
But
It's called
you're
Young
in-
Adult.
But you're in different parts of the country. So how do you know each other?
Well, so Meredith and Emily live together.
Yeah.
Third person.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, just
It's
so
actually-
you know, everybody, that was Emily saying that she and Meredith live together.
there's only 4 people.
Right.
So both Meredith and I live in Chicago,
Mhm.
and there are 4 other people in our program living in Chicago, and there are about 30, 20, somewhere. Sites keep changing. 20
Oh,
to
yeah.
30 other national and international sites where young
thought it
adults
was
come,
more.
spend I think it's like 25 altogether.
I have no
They
idea.
come, spend a year of service, committed to simple living, social justice, vocational discernment. So me, Jonathan, and Meredith were all doing that, and that's how we met.
Yeah, and so in August we had a huge like orientation session. So like we spent a week at a conference center in New York, and that's where we all initially met.
Okay,
Yeah.
that
Emily
answers my
knew each
question.
other.
Well then,
One
how...
more-
Oh,
Wait,
one more
no, what's
question?
up?
Yeah, no, go ahead with your question.
Okay, this one might take a minute, so you might want to regret
Alright.
that. But question number 4 is, what is one thing you've experienced that shapes the way you think about religious issues?
That's a good question.
It's a really good question.
Oh, thank you. Krista Noon.
Is this a disguised way of asking what was your come to Jesus moment?
No, because I hope it's not that at all. I hope it's like a come away from Jesus moment that makes you like more critical and think.
Ah, okay.
It's a very Presbyterian
It's
answer.
so Presbyterian.
Presbyterians
Yeah.
don't have like awakenings.
We don't do
Right,
come
no.
to Jesus moments.
Frozen chosen.
Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
I just want to let y'all know you can cuss in this.
Oh,
We-
that's super
we
helpful.
censor it all with fart noises.
Naturally.
So, right.
That's super helpful to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a very lively vocabulary.
Exactly. And you want to be able to speak freely and like eloquently. So just however it comes to you. spit it out.
Okay, so what was a moment that shaped the way that we do what now?
Consider and think about and approach religious issues. And it
Religious
doesn't have to be a
issues.
moment necessarily, just some
Yeah.
experience of some sort.
Yeah. I think for me, like my biggest thing that sticks out is like, oh geez, I don't even know. I assume it shapes the way that I approach religious issues, but it's the way I approach lots of issues is when I was discriminated against because of my gender during baseball. And like I was told that I couldn't do something because I was a woman or I was a girl. And then learning that Mary Magdalene wasn't a prostitute really helped, coming into my own about the way that the role of women in the world really should be versus the way that women in the world are expected. And that kind of influences literally everything in my life. I don't know if that's actually the answer to that
No, that's
fits,
a good
but
answer,
like
though.
that's
There you
like
go.
my best
That's
answer.
the answer.
Yeah.
Also-
I have a question there real quick. So not everybody, many people do think that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute, and that's just a common conception. So what do you think leads people to arrive at that conclusion, and why is that not true?
What else can women do in biblical times? Prostitute wife or nothing.
Okay, so Mary Magdalene was deemed a prostitute during the conference or the whatever of Nice, where they knocked out the Bibles or the books in the Bible.
The Nicene Creed came out at the
Creed,
council.
thank you.
It's
Yeah.
not, that was what it was called, but
Yeah,
the
but
Nicene Creed is
Yeah,
what
the
we do.
Nicene Creed,
It's a statement.
and it was full of a bunch of old white guys who then deemed that women could not be in positions of power. Ergo, Jesus's companion, which literally, like, more or less translates into like a more spousal
Yeah.
role, they translate companion as prostitute rather as companion as like friend and emotional like counselor. And so it's this whole the patriarchy is the like larger answer personally. But in the text that we currently have, the fact that, you know, angel spoke to Mary and Elizabeth first, Jesus showed himself to Mary and other women first, kind of plays a role into like the actuality of what it should be versus a bunch of old white guys who had power and then wanted to stay in power. Or not white guys, depending on your interpretation of white Jesus.
Of power.
Yeah, the hegemony.
Whoever was the most desired skin color at the time.
Correct.
The equivalent of white. Yeah.
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 And I want to say, just 'cause I was going to ask something similar, because a lot of what this podcast is all about is challenging the traditions we use to interpret scripture and interpret religion.
Okay.
So anytime there's like something that, you know, it's just reopening the conversation in a more intelligent and informed way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the name of it is Hell If We Know, because we don't really know. I mean, we're just trying to reopen the conversation.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
Yeah.
So.
I neither have a master's in theology, a master's in divinity, or a master's in religious studies. So if you would like women who have those.
Your sister doesn't have that, but she's a pastor.
Master in divinity.
Okay, I couldn't
She's
remember.
an MDiv.
Would be good at this.
Yeah, my friend Amy is getting her master's in theology and religious studies. Sidebars, sorry. There's lots of women that I know who can counter a lot of the patriarchal views of Christianity that have been propagated and perpetrated.
But speaking colloquially, and their lived experience as well is also a valuable contribution.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what we're here for.
Oh yeah, well there you go. Colloquial Jesus. That could be like the casual Presbyterian tagline. Take it very casual.
Cool. Well, Emily, you still have yet to answer this question. So now you're on the platform. Go.
Oh gosh. Okay, this is a super cheesy answer, but this year has really reshaped my experience of Christianity. This year, I've spent a lot more time with long-term worship in not my Presbyterian worship style. So especially, we visited churches that are interdenominational and not Methodist. We hit Mennonite. So a lot of different worshiping styles. And so went through that. I was like, okay, this is cool. And then sometime, I think it was probably January or February, I was like, okay, no, this idea, because the way the Presbyterians kind of take the world, that's how I was raised. And so I went to Fourth Church in Chicago, which is one of the biggest, it's the biggest Presbyterian church in the city. I want to say it's one of the biggest in the country, but one of their first places I was there is there for Holy Week, which was amazing. But then they had their like 100x anniversary a few weeks ago, and they're talking about like how they came to be the church they are. And basically it started out as a rich white church, and then in the early 1900s, like 1917 or something, they wanted a pastor from Baltimore, and he said, y'all need to move your church. It's in the rich white part of town. That's not where we need to be as good Christians. We need to be where there is the need. And so he made them move the church basically, and they spoke to their commitment of like showing up and being good allies basically, which is a very simplified version, but just like kind of like living in the United States, like Christianity is not a minority sect. I am not gonna get persecuted against for it. So I think using that platform to move up and move forward other people is the best way I can be Christian in America, which is not quite the question, but that's how I'm at right now. So
that's cool.
That's a really good answer to that question. I think so many people lose sight of that. So many Christians and non-Christians lose sight of the fact that, you know, the main point of the whole Jesus thing was to be a good guy to everybody, no matter what. And
excellent to everyone.
Yeah, excellent to everyone. And if you're losing sight of that, then maybe you're not being the Christian that Jesus may have wanted you to be. Of course, that's not for us to say, but it's for us to interpret the best we can as humans.
For sure.
Our
beer just got here, so we're all really happy.
Yeah.
I liked what you were saying, but I also even more like that the beer is here now. So
we're both and society.
We are.
We're
trying to cultivate both and
rolling in.
Yeah, rolling into the situations. Trying to reject the either or binary that our society creates.
Yeah, man. So that's the introductions.
Oh.
Thanks for
Yeah.
opening up like that.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
problem.
absolutely.
You know, softball questions. That's what I discuss all the time.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah. So there was
Well-
something you were going to get at a minute ago, Chris, before we went into the fourth question. What was that?
Oh yeah. Gosh, what was it? Something that you had said made me think of a question that I can't remember anymore. So we'll move on, and perhaps it'll come to me later in the talk.
Yeah, sounds good. Cool. So today we're going to talk about the Handmaid's Tale and how it relates to Scripture and how Scripture relates to it and how we relate to it and Scripture as a society.
So for those of us who have never seen it or aren't entirely sure what that is, do you want to explain real quick what The Handmaid's Tale is? It's a Hulu show or something?
Read the book.
It's currently on Hulu, right? But
I highly recommend reading the book. It was published in 1985 or 86.
Is it in the
Late 80s. And it's a dystopian novel talking about a very
Spoiler alerts, just...
Oh yeah.
But-
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
So one, it's dystopian. Two, it's a very Christian influence.
Like, what if the Christian patriarchy was
Yeah.
wrong?
Right.
What if? Yeah.
Do you want to just like synopsis kind of?
Go on, Meredith.
So basically, there's this line,
Can I read the IMDb page to it?
yes, do that.
Okay, let me.
Because I don't want to like spoil.
Yeah.
But I.
Yeah, I think people should know about it, but not.
Yeah.
Okay, this is super quick, but it does have an 8.7 out of 10 on IMDb, so it's got to be good. It says, set in a dystopian future, a woman is forced to live as a concubine, that's an old school prostitute, under a fundamentalist theocratic dictatorship. Sounds like a tough situation for our main actress here, Elizabeth Moss.
And it's not just a theocracy;
Ooh.
it's a Christian theocracy. It's a conservative, fundamentalist Christian theocracy.
It's a certain brand of
Right.
Christianity.
Yeah, there's a brand that goes along with it. I definitely
The very white evangelical Christianity we see now is very much
amplified.
yeah. The loud, like the Billy Graham kind of Christianity. That's kind of what we've got.
Or even
going.
more so, Franklin Graham.
Yeah.
Yeah, Franklin Graham, or even what's his name? The guy
Alexander
Joel.
Graham Bell,
Yes.
the guy who invented the
Oh, it's
telephone.
Joel.
Joel
That's
Osteen.
also a Graham.
Yeah.
So
And,
many.
Golden Grams, the cereal.
I mean,
Yeah.
there you go. All
Um,
the
They got soggy too quick.
He's not an awful Graham though.
Right, no.
He's
I
a
don't
good-
think Graham Bell was either, though.
No, Alexander Graham Bell.
Was
he
he?
he was a little bit problematic.
Well,
I believe.
problematic, but not
But I mean, he was a
terrible.
white guy like over 100 years ago, so
Yeah.
like
There's
it
gotta
wasn't
be some-
completely.
So he
his
wasn't
givens
he wasn't terrible by those standards.
But
Graham is-
if that synopsis of the show didn't get your motors pumping, then let me tell you that Yvonne Strahovski, she's the sidekick girl from Chuck, that old NBC sitcom, is in it. She's a really good actress, and she's really hot.
Yeah, she was in that. She's Serena Joy in it.
It's
What
very-
time period is this set in? Like year?
The near
Near
future.
yeah.
Oh,
The
near
original
future.
book was
Okay.
just like kind of now plus 5 years, and then the TV show is like 2017 plus like 2-ish years. So the Hulu show is like
Super near
they
future.
reference Tinder.
Oh, okay.
At the
In
beginning, I
America?
think it's further down the line
Yes.
it is. Yeah.
It's in America. It's kind of like northeast, it's like near the border
It's-
of Canada.
Yeah, it's
where
based
people-
in like
Maine. People flee to Canada. You know, like now.
yeah.
So it is in the very near future, or like
Super
now,
near.
and maybe in November.
2 years.
Right.
Yeah. It's now plus 2 years
Go
basically.
vote, y'all.
Right. At the
Please
beginning, they
vote.
make it seem like it's like an entirely different situation,
Yeah.
like way down the road. But then it's like, and 2 years ago, she was living an exactly
Mhm.
normal life like we all do.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was some sort of revolution. I forget what they don't call it America anymore. They
No,
call it something
Gilead?
weird. And, like,
Gilead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just make it super like
Which is
sci-fi
A
sounding.
biblical reference.
You know, there is
yeah,
a
I knew
balm
that.
in.
Whoops. I
It's
didn't
a
actually know
yeah. See, there you go.
that.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, tying it all. So yeah, they call it Gilead, and everything we just said.
Well, do you want to start by all three of you, or a little bit of everybody, giving a summary of? You said Genesis 30, right?
Yeah, it's all tied to Genesis. Well, the main thing is tied to Genesis 30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hang on
So-
one sec. Let me just
Oh,
go
I've
look
got
that
it.
one up.
What is
No,
Genesis
this
30?
This was a BYOB.
Oh, the
That's
Rachel.
Yeah,
Yes.
they read that. So there's this
Yeah.
like recurring scene. There's a ceremony in the show.
Yeah.
It ain't
No,
fun.
nobody's-
It ain't fun.
Definitely
There's 3 people involved. No one's having fun.
And
least
so the
possible good
idea, so
application.
the premise of this show is that humanity has polluted the earth. And
Inconceivable.
weird.
inconceivable. And that word is used the way that that word should be used.
In some hypothetical future where the bad decisions we make completely f up our climate.
Right.
So
And-
weird.
And
to do
so
that.
because humanity has f***ed up the world, there is a high increase in infertility to the point that birthing rates have dropped significantly. Not just like kind of. And so
And those that do that are able to get pregnant are giving birth to children with
birth defects.
birth defects of some kind, which
Right.
is not ideal for propagating a species.
Correct. And it kind of, I think it ties back to the Genesis 30 of like where Rachel gives her handmaiden to Jacob in order to have kids, right?
Right, yeah.
Isn't that like the basis?
And they read that passage every time.
Right. And so in this ceremony that Jonathan was explaining, the handmaiden, which in the show is Elizabeth Moss, and then the commander, who is the patriarch of the family.
Played by Voldemort's brother. Fun fact.
Yeah, fun fact. And then the wife of the commander, Serena Joy, who is what's her face that you just the
God, what's
side
her
chick of Chuck.
No.
Well, the Rachel in the story.
Well, the
Yes,
Rachel in the
she's
story.
Rachel.
So all 3 of those characters are in the room when the procreating copulation is happening.
They have to watch.
Yeah.
They
They're
have
all
to
doing
they're
it.
participate.
The sex
Well-
is not supposed to be enjoyable.
No.
So, like, the commander penetrates
Or
the
consensual.
handmaiden. Well, yeah. The commander penetrates the handmaiden. The handmaiden is, like,
Holding
she's being held by the wife, the Rachel.
yeah.
Uh,
And the idea is that by them interlocking hands that they're one.
It's almost as good as
Oh.
for the male his wife
Right, but just an
If they could,
intermediary in the middle.
spawn children.
Yeah.
But the wife in this scenario is not able to conceive children, or they assume she is not able to conceive children because the mentioning of a male not being able to conceive children is like unthinkable.
Yeah, no, it's the uterus.
It's always the uterus's fault.
So this directly correlates then to that Genesis 30 chapter, which is
Yes.
which
I was
is
about to-
where Rachel, who's
Okay.
who was Rachel played by? Rachel was the
Rachel- Oh,
The
the actual.
The
Which
Serena Joy,
the
okay.
wife, the commander
the
of
wife.
Okay, so Rachel is not able to conceive in this Bible passage, and so this TV show on Hulu and this book, you said it was published in 85 or 86, is sort of a modern take on that old Bible passage, correct?
Yes, but I also think it's crucial to mention that Margaret Atwood, the author of Handmaid's
It's a
Tale,
Margaret Atwood book? Okay. She's like a famous
And-
writer person.
yes, she's
up
super
there.
famous, and I personally really love her writings. They're very real, especially from the perspective of a woman. But in 85, like late 80s when it was published, she did not create anything new.
Yeah.
All of the injustices that were done and had been done and were continuing to be done in her book had been done in our world. Not
Like
necessarily
from other countries.
or religious backgrounds.
Okay.
Didn't just come out of her.
Right. It wasn't, and she was very purposeful of making it that all of these cruelties that they were later named cruelties had been done previously in the real world. She did not create
So these
anything.
are not brainchildren of hers. She's just sort of
No.
taking things that happen in the world, in societies, and pushing them all into one tale.
Right.
Yeah.
And mostly in the 20th century.
And done with a name of like making the population better. Like it's for the good of the whole, which sounds very nice on paper. Of course, if you're able to spawn children and nobody else is, you should spawn children. But it's just approached in such a way that duty is not optional, which is also becoming a reality. Well, it has been reality for other women.
Yeah.
And even within the United States, as long as you're not white.
Right.
So brief summary, just for the biblical element of it. In Genesis 30, You've got Rachel and Jacob. Jacob is the son of Abraham, right?
Yes.
Yes.
No, son of Isaac. Isaac's the
One
son
of
Abraham.
them. Yeah.
He's from the
That was
Abrahamic
a test.
lineage.
and
Yeah,
that's
he's-
why
you
I
got
said
it.
that way.
Yes.
It's
I
because
figured.
Abraham's the guy with so many sons, and there's a whole song about it.
Oh.
7 sons, in fact.
Great.
Was it 7?
Had many
Father
sons.
Abraham.
Seven's a significant.
Well, yeah,
Seven's
because
had
the
Father
7 tribes of Israel.
12 tribes.
Is it 12
That's
tribes?
later. That's Isaac's
Is
kids.
it really?
Yeah, that's Isaac's kids.
So close. Oh well.
It's okay.
Yeah.
This is not your.
Not my thing.
area
Hey,
of study.
then now
Not
would be
my-
a good time to say hello if we know.
Oh, yeah.
Hell if I know.
No, we.
really
We.
like to
Oh,
say
sorry.
that
We.
title.
We're a collective.
I don't like speaking for other people.
Oh, that's true. That's nice.
Huh.
So anyway, in Genesis 30, you've got the grandson of Abraham, Isaac's son Jacob, and he's traveling along. He's running away from Esau because he stole his inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm remembering all this right.
No.
I
Right.
didn't actually brief on this before I got into it, so I hope I'm remembering right. But Jacob is over, and he had this lady that he liked, and so he worked for 7 years. And then the father of the lady didn't give it to him, even though he said he would after he worked for him 7 years. So then he worked for him 7 more years, and then he had 2 wives, the one from the first time and the one from the second time. I bet nobody's ever told this story as well as I'm telling it. So anyway, now they're all married, and they're all having a great time being married, except that Rachel can't have kids, and she says, "Give me children or I shall die." So Jacob got angry with Rachel, because that makes sense, and trying to figure it out, Rachel says, "Okay, take Bilhah," or that's probably saying that wrong, "Bilhah, my servant, and you
Oh wait,
can..."
I read this name too. Oh, I read this as Bila, which is like Borat's neighbor in the movie Borat. So I don't know if it's that, but maybe not.
That movie with Borat in it?
Oh, you know.
As opposed to
Right.
the other movie with Borat in it.
Right. Well, Bilhah works for me. I think that sounds better.
Yeah,
So
Just
Bilhah.
say it with confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one will know.
Do you speak Hebrew?
I took 1 semester.
Oh.
You're more than the other me and Meredith at least.
Yeah.
Hell if I know.
I have a
Right.
Jewish friend, so I.
Oh, I do
Well.
too.
I don't.
He's getting married in August.
Jacob has sex with Bilhah, and they have a kid. And this goes on, and then the other wife, Leah, is like, "Hey, do the same with my servant," and then they have some kids, and then it's like a back and forth. We're like, "No, my servant, no, my servant," and then the regular ladies, not the regular ladies, they're all
Wives?
The wives.
The wives?
Yeah, the wives are like, "Wait, now we can have kids too." So then he has children with them as well, and the whole thing's weird. But this is the story they read every time they engage in this ceremony in the show or in the book. Is that they read from this passage in the Bible to be like, and here's our justification that it's been done before. This is
Okay.
why it's correct.
So Jacob is the frickin' man, getting down and dirty with handmaidens and wives left and right, just because he says it's justified by
Well,
you
God
can't have
says.
kids, you can't have kids, so give me all your servants and we'll pretend that it's yours.
I mean,
Jacob was a businessman. He had things to do. He had, he wanted these things done, and he found the loopholes of the time period, and he did it
the
the way that
average
he
life
wanted to do.
expectancy was so low. Like you had to do make a lot of children, in the hopes that one of them was gonna make it to like make more
Adulthood to
children.
procreate.
Oh, the
Yeah.
infant mortality rate, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point, we've kind of talked a lot about like the situation, and obviously that's the most important thing in the story is like the situation of the women in it and the message that that's about. But being a podcast about religion, I kind of want to take it back to that a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
And I remember there was one scene. I don't know if I'm sure it's in the book, but I haven't read the book. There's one bit in like the so sorry. Oh
Dark
man,
feelings.
that was a dangerous look. That was painful.
It's
Way
okay.
off thought now.
I'm sorry.
No, that was
Religion.
okay. That
Go
was
back to
sorry
the
about
topic.
religion. Yeah, there's a scene in like the second or third episode where they're walking through town and they see these churches getting torn down.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was an interesting juxtaposition, and I feel like there's a lot to say about it. The fact that they're basing this society and this system and how they function and do these ceremonies off of an ancient religious tradition, while simultaneously tearing down the institutions of that religion in the modern world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so
Well-
is that another facet of the TV show? Is talking about how religion today is tearing, like you said, tearing down religion?
Well, they don't talk about it, but there is that scene where they tear down the
don't they
churches.
hang priests?
They hang
though?
priests because
Oh,
they're
yeah.
celibate.
Yeah.
They hang priests and nuns because they
They've sworn
they
off
don't
the
want to
sex.
procreate.
Okay.
And procreation in this society
Is key.
the only thing.
And I haven't seen I've only gotten partway through the
How far did you
series.
get? halfway through the third episode. Okay, yeah.
I think
It's
we
an
haven't.
intense show.
It's very intense and it's very difficult to watch. For lots of
Especially
reasons.
post-November 2016.
Right. But I also, from my understanding of the book, some of that like symbolism is coming from, it's not the right form of Christianity. Like they hung Quakers, very peaceful people, but they were helping women and men flee to Canada, or what is understood as Canada.
Yeah, what we know to be canon. And it's an interpretation thing as well. Of
Right.
Like making, like you can make, the Bible is such an old and convoluted and contradictory document, frankly, that you can make it say whatever you want.
Personally, I read the Old Testament for history, not moral lessons.
It's interesting y'all talked about the Old Testament being history, because all 3 episodes that we've done so far have been Old Testament stuff, and I didn't even realize that until just now. But that is sort of a thing, because when we did the episode about Genesis, we talked about that not being a lesson in literally where the world came from. It's just a lesson in who we are and who we are in relation to God.
Right.
And we looked at the passage about Elisha in 2 Kings. We talk about this not being a lesson in, like, y'all know the one where Elisha kills some children with bears?
Probably.
At one point,
He sets a couple she-bears on some children because they call him bald.
Yeah. And so he mauls them into 42 pieces. It's very specific about that.
Yep.
But we talk about that's not a lesson for, like, okay, don't call people bald. That's not the point of that story.
Right.
It's also
That's
not,
how I like to
don't
look at it.
act this way if people call you bald.
Right. Just
The
look
idea is
out.
that, like, this isn't a lesson on how to act. This isn't a lesson on anything about God. This is a history story about someone not being perfect.
Yeah.
Right.
Being very specifically unperfect in this instance.
Yeah, it's very. I feel it should be interpreted more as a fable than like a manual of like
Right.
how to live
Right.
your life. Of like, this is what happened, and they fucked up, and this is the consequence they got from it. Basically,
Right.
like
Very much a dead document.
the wife that looked back and turned into a pillar
yeah,
of
Lot's
salt.
wife, yeah.
Lot's wife. Like this is the most of what the major stories that come out of the Old Testament can definitely be interpreted more as cautionary tales than like a guide to how to live your life, like step by step. Like this is why, like they already made the mistakes. Don't do it as well. Live a good life is how I think.
Right.
That's how I take it.
Yeah.
Right. And then in the New Testament, it's the love thy neighbor and
But
Well, that's in the
That
the
is
chief
too.
commandment
Well,
in Deuteronomy is also.
yeah.
And there's stuff in the New Testament too that. Sorry, I mean.
New
I'm
Testament
sorry
has
for
also
that,
got
but-
some caution, like
Yeah.
some things
Right.
you
New
probably should
Testament
not
definitely has
follow.
cautionary tales, but I think like the overarching theme of the New Testament is like, you know, Jesus Christ's miracles and like with whom he is conversing and, you know, not afraid of getting your hands dirty and like more ways of like, I don't even know how I'm trying to say this, but
It's such a vague
Yeah.
book as well.
right, it's
And
super
so
vague,
easy,
but like
it's
the
very
overarching
easy to
like,
literally interpret it.
yeah, you can't literally interpret it.
But some people do.
But some people do.
Bless
and
their hearts.
bless their
Bless
heart.
So, and like, I guess sort of to summarize, I think going back also to the desecration, or not desecration, but just demolition of the churches, and looking at it as an Old Testament passage, I think part of what I get from this story, or at least from the TV show, is the fact that this is what happens when you take the Bible, especially like Old Testament stories, as prescriptive rather than as just like a history story, as like something that is about where we came from or about who we are or were or whatever. It's the people look at Old Testament stories, they look at these patriarchs, sort of the way we talked about Elisha before. They look at them as if they're supposed to be the examples, but I don't think there's ever any point in Scripture or in church tradition where any human other than Jesus is supposed to be an example specifically.
I was
They're
just going to
just
say that. Throughout the entire Bible, I don't think it ever says you should be like X person unless that X person is Jesus. And you're very right about that. All of you guys are right in that, I think, in that all of these tales are, you know, this is where we came from, this is what humanity used to look like, and you can take what you will from them, interpret them any way you want, except for the Jesus thing. Jesus is who you should be like. And I think that's kind of...
That's a hard line.
Yeah, so I think that's the danger. I think that's what it's illustrating to me, at least when I look at it in a religious context, is it's illustrating that danger of looking at text or historical religious text prescriptively. And I think if you put that specifically in conjunction with the demolition of the churches, You've got this idea. I think that sort of points to part of the role of what the church should be and what I want this podcast to be, to really speak to the power that we wield right now. I want it to be something where we keep talking about things and refute any sort of idea that these old ancient stories are supposed to be examples of how we live today.
Yeah.
But any more thoughts or anything else y'all wanted to say about the show or book or
Read the book.
So that our couple viewers so that our couple listeners can
My mom.
You're word of listeners.
We haven't even released an episode yet.
It's okay, I'm optimistic.
so that our couple listeners can get a better hold of Handmaid's Tale. What's your Hulu password?
I don't have a
We
Hulu
borrow
password.
someone else's.
I borrowed someone else's too.
Ah, so
Read
that's the
the
thing.
book.
Nobody has a Hulu password. Everybody borrows their Hulu password from the 3 people on the planet who do have one, and we're all mooching off a friend of a friend of a friend.
Geeky.
Basically. But read the book.
It's
It's
a very accessible book.
Yeah, the show does a really good job of going into some of the backstory and like
The show is scarier to me.
right. The
actually.
show is a lot scarier.
because it's a 2017.
It's
up or down a couple
it's
years.
it's very relevant,
Instead
and
of
it's very
82,
it kind
85.
of hits you in the heart if these are actual realities that half of the population is currently very fearful of. So like the show is very difficult to watch, but it does a really great job in going into some of the larger view, and they take a little bit of creative processing of like being able to expand on some of the storylines, which I have really appreciated in the show. But the book does a really amazing job of setting up this world and setting up Gilead.
So yeah, this does sound like a really interesting tale, a really interesting book, and a really interesting TV show.
Is there anything else y'all want to plug? Since y'all have an audience right now?
Yes.
Any books you're writing,
reports.
upcoming projects? Or anything y'all are into that you think needs a bigger audience?
Let's see.
Vote.
Stay
This does
informed.
not become our
Stay-
future.
Like, if you're listening to this, give whatever woman you know a hug and
A
the
cookie.
because life
Yes.
is tough.
Yes,
Okay.
a solid handshake, whatever.
Yeah.
vote.
Right. Whatever form of admiration, and I am sorry that you're living in a fucked up world right now, like, because there are a lot of people who are very fearful.
That is about all we have time for this episode. So we will see you next time. Thank you guys for being
thanks
on.
so
Thank
much.
you for
Yeah, of course.
putting 2 more voices in our normally two boys podcast. And John, we'll see you next time.
Bye. At the end.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.